All right, so now that we have a really strong feel for the different approaches we can take when the root motion is by a fourth or a fifth, let's expand a little bit, and we're going to look at what happens when the bass moves by a third or a sixth. And the beauty here is that we're going to find this is so much less complicated. So root movement of a third, and again, third up. Why don't I do it here? Third up is a sixth down. So it's the same motion, so they're equivalent, right? Those are intervals that invert just like fourths and fifths. So the beauty here is that when chords move by a third, when the root moves by a third, there will always be two common tones, which is amazing. So we had all these different parameters when the root moved by a fourth, because there is one common tone, but sometimes we don't want to take it, or sometimes we have to take it and then something can move by a fourth. A lot of different moving pieces and parts there. You can imagine, though, that when there are two common tones to take advantage of, we can get some amazingly smooth musical lines over top of that, smooth motion between chords. So our approach here is always going to be to take the two common tones that we get when the chords move this way. So if we're in G and we start here on a 1 chord and go to a 6 chord, that should sound so smooth and connected because there are these two common tones. G is a G, B, D chord, and E minor is E, G, B. So B and G are present in both of those chords, right? So we can really make good use of that and just hold steady on those two voices while the other, the tenor in this case, is just going to move by a step to make sure that we have the root doubled. It really doesn't get any more straightforward than this. We can see, of course, it doesn't have to be the soprano and the alto voice to stay put here from a 1 chord to a 3 chord. We've got the tenor voice. This is G, to B minor. And so the tenors are going to stay on D, and the sopranos are going to stay on B, right? Super smooth. This motion, we hear a lot of that 1 to 3 in movie scores. Right, because it has this excellent sense of feeling like we're staying in the same place but also expanding a little bit, partly because of these two common tones. So what that does is that we can put these ideas together, root movement of a third and a fourth, and create texture, musical textures in which the chords are moving in, multiple relationships together. And so if we saw something like this, we can immediately just look at the bass motion to determine which techniques we want to use. We're here in G minor now. And so if we look at the beginning, we've got motion of a third, motion of a third, motion of a fourth, right? So we've got these, we might be in B flat major. Just saying that, some surprising analysis here. So we've got these motions of a third and then motion of a fourth. And so we know that these first two chords, we're going to have two common tones with these first two chord changes. Two common tones to take advantage of. Same thing here. If we look, we can tell that from this chord to the next chord, there are going to be two common tones because the root movement is by a third. Here, we know there would be one common tone, and we're less certain about whether we're going to use that or not, but we know what techniques to draw from. So if we looked at a fully fleshed out version of this here, first one's in B flat, starts on a 6 chord, so we go from 6 to 4 to 2, and then here's a 5 chord, and presumably we'd go to a 1 chord after that. And you can see, because the root movement is by a third, the part writing here is to stay on those common tones, have the tenors go up by step to double the root. Same thing here. We're moving by a third. And so here the two common tones are the tenor and alto voices, C, G. So they're going to stay put between our 4 chord. Sorry, E flat. I covered up the ledger line with the box that I wrote there. E flat and G. E flat and G are consistent between the 4 chord and the 2 chord. And then here, because we move by a fourth, we want to know what the common tone is. And between this C minor chord, C, E flat, G, to F, A, C. C is common, so we can see the soprano part. Stays common, while the other voices move in these wonderful parallel thirds. Right? Do you see how that happens? And you can sort of go through this. You can go through this second example. Maybe pause the video and just take a look at that, and see the ways in which these chords move in predictable, smooth relationships to one another. Getting there. The one thing I want to point out, I'm going to just speed through this. Look at those 2 common tones. Here, this motion, this is similar motion because we're not taking the common tone. So these upper 3 voices move downwards in the same direction to the nearest member of the next chord. This one has that jump of a fourth, and we know when we have the jump of a fourth, we want to have a common tone like the altos do here, right? So you can recognize all these techniques. The last thing I want to get to is right here at the end, this motion to the 1 chord from 5 to 1. And what we have here, you can see I've abbreviated TRC. That stands for triple root cadence. TRC, triple root cadence, because if we looked at this 1 chord, we're in G major, we have G in the bass, G in the tenor, G in the alto, and then B in the soprano. So we have 3 roots. We have not doubled the root as we usually do. We've tripled the root. And we can only do this on the very last chord. And the reason we do it is so that if we look at the alto line here, because we want their line, which is such a nice musical line, to resolve, right? We want them to go from F sharp to G at the end, because then it sounds like it's finished. If they're doing that line, going down to D there to fill out the triad, right, to make it a GBD, that's fine, but it doesn't have the same finality. So you'll often see or want to use a triple root cadence at the very end, but only on the very, very, very last chord. We can't do triple root cadence anywhere, triple root cadences anywhere else. Because remember, the whole key to this technique is that we're doubling the root. If all of a sudden in the middle of your music, you now have 3 roots, you now have no technique to get you to the next chord. So little bit of an extra thing, but that's just for the very last chord. The most critical thing in all of this is to recognize that when the motion is moving by a third, you've got those 2 common tones. Really take advantage, because the motion of a fourth does involve a little bit more processing and thinking. So you want to make the motion that moves by a third as straightforward as you can have it.